some truly awful news coming out of the United States and the United Kingdom that the four big pattern companies that they make physical sewing patterns is going into liquidation. Now you're probably like, "Oh my god, Dane, with all the shit in the world, why is this like big bad news?" Okay, if you don't sew, that means nothing to you. And please forgive the mark on my arm. I'm seeing it. I'm putting shots on my shoulder because I really fucked it up sewing, ironically, the other day. If you have even a cursory glance as to what's going on in the U.S. with crafting, Joann's Fabric, the last real major sewing supply retailer, recently went out of business quite abruptly at that. That leaves Hobby Lobby, which is evil and nobody who's any good would use. And also, the quality of their shit is terrible. Just my dead grandmother was a massive fan. And then Walmart, who again, quality is terrible, and they're not really great either. And the ones that actually have a full sewing department are like few and far between. So if you're not a sewer, this might mean nothing to you, but trying to buy your fabric online without feeling it and like, is it any good? Oh, that's just hell. So Joann's was overpriced, but it was ours. It was all we had after they killed Hancock Fabric and some other sewing suppliers around 2017, 16. I can't remember. If you live in a big city, there's probably fabric suppliers, but even Chicago, there's not as many as you'd think. So it's strictly a New York, LA thing, and even LA seems to have the most of all three cities, at least from what I could see browsing. I could be wrong, but Joann's was horribly overpriced. Like the most expensive fabric by yard was $60 USD. Here in Mexico at Modatella's comparable store, but not overpriced like that, would be $10 USD, and I love it. And yes, I know this is because the minimum wage and cost of living, people don't make as much money. But even if you do it percentage wise, that's still cheaper. Like, versus their minimum wage versus our minimum wage, Joann's was way more money. So these pattern companies are very, very old. Most of them go back to the 1900, like 1900. And they did some really great stuff in the past 12 years since I started sewing. They did a lot of vintage patterns, bringing that back. They were starting to do adaptable patterns for people who are disabled. Yo. And it was just really good stuff, man. And you go to Joann's, you go on certain days. These patterns were like $25 just one day, which is way too much fucking money. And if you want the special days, minus Vogue, they'd be $1.99, and Vogue would be $4.99 because they were usually more complex haute couture style patterns. You didn't just start with Vogue usually. So how it used to be was, you want to learn to sew, you'd maybe take a class or learn online. It's very hard to find a physical class, especially outside of the city anymore. And you go buy a quick sew pattern, which was a sibling of Simplicity, which was a massive. It was Simplicity, Vogue, McCall's, Butterick, and Quick Sew. Quick Sew was $2.99 on any given day, maybe $6.99 if it was more pieces, and it was idiot proof. And so that's where we all started. Now you can't do that. You can't go pick your fabric and your thread and your pattern out in one place. You have to be online. You don't know if this is right, especially if you're new. Even if you're not new, again, picking fabric by the internet is hell. So to have these pattern companies that are the last massive pattern companies go under is horrific. Especially because refer back to, they had those archives of patterns from the 1900s, like what's going to happen to all that. And this will mean that nowhere in the United States, and I'm assuming United Kingdom by the article I read, can you just go pick up a paper pattern that you know will be fairly usable for any level of sewing minus Vogue. So it's just really awful. It takes the entry level out of that completely out, and it's already been whittled away as much as it can be. And I always thought making women do home ec was such bullshit, and I stand by that. But you gotta understand, by the time I was in school in the late '90s, early '00s, middle school, high school, home ec didn't teach sewing. I was lucky that my school, one of my schools, I went to so many schools, had a sewing class, and I did take that for a whole semester, but it didn't stick. I did not retain enough of it. So then I was lucky, only in this area, that the college in the Utah town I moved to had a sewing class. That's where I learned most everything else I've ever used since, and it was a very good class, and I didn't even finish the semester, so it was a good class. That's because Mormons, housewives gotta sew. That's by 2013, that was very unusual to find. So imagine today. um, Even places like LA and Chicago and New York, you might find a class that's gonna be like $40 to take, versus what like a community college would be. That's a lot of money, and nobody has money, let alone time anymore. But repairing clothes and making clothes is a really important skill set if you wish to learn it, especially if you want ethical fashion. Now, you're never gonna have fully ethical fashion because fabric making is the dyeing is very poorly regulated, but it's probably the most ethical step you're gonna be able to get, short of like spinning and weaving your own linen, and your own thread. And honestly, as a fat person who is disabled, I love it because that's the only place my clothes fit, for sure. Even really great retailers that I spend way too much money on, sometimes they're too loose in the bust or the waist, but tight in another area. They're not made for every literal body, and if it doesn't stretch enough, it's not very helpful. I did not know that pattern making is mostly an English speaking country thing. Australia, Canada, England, and the United States. I don't know about any other like European countries, but it's definitely not a Latin American thing. I looked for that when I got here in Mexico, and it's like, what? You can technically find them. They're very expensive, and the sizing is tiny. So it's not helpful at all. Then add in the fun, as an American, I don't know metrics very well, and that's just a whole nother layer of complicated. The other option, which will now be the default option, is you'll have to go somewhere else to buy a digital pattern, which means you'll need access to a printer, which at 38, I'm the only person I know who has a printer. Most of my sisters don't even have laptops, let alone printers. I always found it to be a really essential thing, and even here when I got in Mexico before I decided to print my patterns, I was like, I gotta print some legal documents, business documents, and sign them. And, that's, a lot of places won't take a digitally done signature. But that's just a whole, like, who's gonna pay $150 for a printer that'll break in 5 years when they're like, I just kind of want to see if I like sewing? I sure as shit wouldn't. It's a huge barrier. Then you still have to pay for the pattern, which is going to be probably around $10, maybe higher depending what you're making, and you're gonna have to find the thread and the fabric and a sewing machine all online with no advice and no help. Good luck with that. That's horrible. Especially if you're poor, you're gonna go used and you don't know if they're legit or not, or if they're telling the truth, etc. So yeah, this is just really sad to me. I mean, I think all humans should have some basic, at least, repair skills. Like, I think a girl should be able to, fix a car, which I admittedly am not great at, as much as a boy should be able to cook and sew, and the girl should be able to fight and do basic home repairs. Like, it's just basic adulting, but it's basically on a death knell at the time it's needed the most. Because what's going to happen? Everything's going to be more expensive, and yes, that includes the fabrics and threads, especially online. But it's going to be more expensive to just be buying clothes. People are going to go, oh, I should sew, and then they're going to see it's going to be like this, and they're going to be like, no, thank you.